the information on the website is so outdated.
Right.
Because it was like stuff we wrote before we even began the season 1. It was just like our thoughts about like where we thought season 1 would go.
Yeah. So then I was offended.
But it isn't. We hit all of our goals. We did it. And I'm just like over here pouting because like, yeah, I know we did it, but we didn't do it the way I wanted to. Like, that's how I feel like you're like creating this like caricature of me.
Philosophical. Like, what I'm saying to you is, had I not married you, I could have gone my whole life without ever pondering the like philosophical underpinnings of my beliefs. But like, had I not met you, like, I would just be like living my life, doing my thing, not having these conversations, and I would live a perfectly full life.
Are you in protest and defiance of the content I've chosen for season 2, refusing to be part of those discussions? Is that your position that like you don't have anything to do with it until we go back to season 3 and we're
You mean
focusing...
like the philosophical underpinnings? Yeah, I don't.
You don't have anything to do with it.
Ah, welcome. I'm so glad you could join us. Please come in. Your presence honors us. Here at the Mr. Homemaker podcast, we share our stories and challenges, collect the best expert advice, and offer one another support as we learn to manage our households. Your perspective and contributions will be very valuable. And just in time, today's discussion is about to begin. It is my pleasure to present Mr. Homemaker.
It is November. As of August 1st, I'm a full-time Mr. Homemaker. My leave of absence ended. I resigned. My employment status, depending on the context, is either unemployed or entrepreneur or freelance consultant or media personality.
All of those things. As we said, there's a lot of entrepreneurs on The Bachelor, so...
August... Wait, are you saying I need to find a new...
Or Bachelorette.
Yeah, it was Bachelorette. So August, September, October... That's three months. We had a 6-month leave of absence. We're now 3 months into post leave of absence. Just to orient ourselves in our timeline.
Yeah.
Okay. But so that only adds up to 9 months, but actually like 3 months prior to that, a year ago, 2 days ago, was when like the cascade of events that led to all of this began. Okay, so that's where we're at. So now today I was talking to you about the podcast, and you raised the issue of like our season 1 versus season 2 content, and sort of like how you feel about the different contents and different formats, and let's say pros and cons, things we like or dislike more or less. And that catalyzed the conversation we had around noon today while you were on your lunch break.
Yes, let's back up first.
Yeah.
So, to put context around this, we were talking about your programming in season 2.
Yeah.
And how you have been very frustrated that we've kind of fallen away from achieving our goals. And we have very different styles when it comes to like goal setting, goal tracking, and achievement, right? And I had made the comment that like I think we are making strides towards that, and you feel like we've kind of thrown it out the window, which is and so my comment was that I think the podcast has kind of turned the corner towards more philosophical views of men and women, husbands and wives, family dynamics, and marriage. But we've gone beyond that to things like looking at like postmodernism and humanism and all of those things. A very philosophical approach to family and marriage, which is automatically a difference for us. Like I am very much like the practical, but what are the things we need to do to be an effective family? And I was saying that I recognize that you need that kind of foundational level and to do the research and come from an academic perspective, but that I think that is taking time away from that takes a lot of time in a day to do the research and to think through it and to talk with people on Reddit and to do all of that. And that I felt like it was, that takes time away from the goals and objectives that we had originally set. And actually, as I talk about this, I realize it all comes back to the comment you said was that when people you've been talking with on Reddit basically said like you should revamp your Mr. Homemaker website because it doesn't jive.
That's what it was.
The website that you put together does not jive, nor does it make does it explain?
Yeah, it doesn't make readily available the kind of information people need to understand if they come upon like our latest episode, if that's the first thing they see, or like one of the little clips or shorts that get published.
Right.
If that's the first thing you see and then you go to the website to like, oh, what's this all about? The information on the website is so outdated.
Right.
Because it was like stuff we wrote before we even began the season 1. It was just like our thoughts about like where we thought season 1 would go.
Yeah. And
we really haven't updated anything since then. And so I was getting a lot of pushback of people being like, why is this so like smoke screeny, bait and switchy? Like you're talking about this over here, but then you're doing this over there. I'm like, oh, like that's just, I just kind of let that slide. Like it wasn't like a disinformation campaign or something. But
so then I was offended by your like suggestion that we
need to update
and switch focus. I'm like, but we are still working on the goals and objectives that we set, and I feel like while it's not been perfect, like we are making strides against that.
Yeah.
And the challenge that I think that you have for you, it's like an all or nothing. Either we're doing it or we're not. Whereas I can be a lot more lackadaisical. In like, well, like, but if I have this goal, like maybe I fall off for a week or two, but then I'm gonna like come back to it, and we're gonna keep.
Yeah, you're less discouraged by setbacks and inconsistency.
Right. So that's what brings us to our discussion today. Because I think that we have made a lot more progress than you think we have, and that we should not give up on them, and maybe it's time to rededicate ourselves to continuing to achieve this. And so here we are, ready to talk about it.
Yeah, so my hesitation is, again, it's not an all or nothing proposition, but to the extent that we agree that there was something wrong either with the goals themselves or the way we went about pursuing them or the way we were communicating about the goals or like whether or not we were both committed to all the goals equally, meaning between you and I and among the goals. Like there's a number of things that we could decompose and AAR, after action review. But just sort of my general thought is I don't think like recommitting, I mean like let's rerun the play that didn't work on the field last down. Like last down we got tackled in the backfield and we didn't gain any yards, or we gained some yards but we didn't get a first down. We got 2 yards.
Yeah. Let's
run that play again. Like or we could think about, hey, maybe we should call a different play. Maybe we should rethink how we're approaching this.
Well, maybe, or we ran that play in the last game and now we're in a new game and the weather's different and we're playing a different team. And so this like
so what conditions do you think have changed that will materially affect the way we execute on our strategy?
I think in the first 6 months we were trying to do all of the things at once. So we were trying to adjust to you making this drastic change, to assessing and realigning our budget. We had a 6-month-old child at the time that took a lot more attention and went through from 6 months to 18 months is like a pretty, like that to me is a tumultuous time. It's like, first they need a lot of attention, like just like in terms of what they need. Then we turn the corner of, okay, now this human is walking about and like, you're afraid they're going to fall and hit their face and everything at all times. And then
Climbing.
The human now understands that they can climb over things, get through things, crawl under gates. And so now
Over
it's
couches.
like, right. And so now it's more of like, we can leave him for a little while, like within, arm's length or seeable distance.
Yeah.
But there's, but it's not like our older, like he's getting to the point where like you can put him in front of a show for a little while and he's going to be able to watch it, or he's going to do an activity like our girls do.
So our youngest
I think,
is a different type of attention he needs. That is a factor.
I think the second thing is we have actually done a lot of the things that we were trying to do simultaneously in the first 6 months that were critical to us being able to make the choice we needed on August 1st. One, we had to make sure that we could realign our lives and work within the budget and live on my salary.
Yeah.
We've done that. Like
Yeah.
that, we know we're in like autopilot on that.
Yeah.
Two, we were trying to figure out financially, like what was our strategy. And I think we're still doing that, but we've made some great strides in like investing and kind of starting that process.
Yep.
I think we have gotten into the school year where now, I know it feels like it's been forever, but it's only been 2 months of like being back in the school rhythm, right?
Yeah.
And so we're now like starting to get a good rhythm around what we're doing. We just recently reevaluated kind of how we're spending like our days and our times in terms of like when I can jump in and be more helpful and give you a bit more time to like focus on things. And we've been reassessing like, okay, does it make sense for you to run and do groceries with our youngest? Realizing that's like kind of an issue. So maybe on the day that he's
as
at
people
school,
on Instagram will know,
Yeah.
that went poorly.
right?
Yeah.
And so maybe it's like, so we are adjusting, but we are like making forward progress on each of these things. And so I think that we do have the time and ability and starting to build the consistency to go back to some of the goals that we had and figure out a way to prioritize them. Or maybe there are some that we say like, you know what, we thought this was a really great goal, but it's not going to happen with the structure we have.
Yeah, if you want to, what you're saying now kind of resonates with me more than recommitting. I think if you're saying, let's like go back and update, revise, refine, like validate or whatever, that I think we are probably better positioned for that because there have been some changes to the conditions between our son getting older and we're not on summer vacation, we're in the school year now.
Right.
Also, your work situation has changed a little bit. I'm not sure for better or for worse, but like it is worth noting that a major shaping force in our environment through my leave of absence was that your work duties involved a somewhat consistent but like demanding travel cycle.
Right.
And so your role has shifted again, and so that's I'm not sure that I can say that it's less or more or what it is, but it's different. So like that's another thing to. So anyway, so your work, summer vacation, kids are getting bigger. So I think those are 3 reasons that we could say.
And youngest is in school. We spent 6 months without him being in school at all.
Yeah.
And now we have a bit more time and leeway that we literally have only gotten 8 weeks of, right? So
Yeah. Okay.
I feel like we think we're like so much further along, but when you stop to realize like we are only 8 weeks into the school year and daycare and all of that, like that's actually we're not that far in. But then we did start the discussion, and I think it's important to acknowledge too, right, that like we talked about early on in like understanding your partner and their communication style and their, kind of strengths and weaknesses. And one of the things that I have recently said to you like very clearly is like, one, unless it is a construct of my own making, I am pretty terrible at like remembering or like following like a process or like a structure that we put in place. So for instance, like we'll say, okay, this is the way that we're going to start doing the morning routine. And then I'm like, I kind of get like sidetracked or I'm kind of doing things in a different way. And I'm completely open to you being like, hey, we said we're going to do this, and like kind of pivoting. But I feel like you get very frustrated in like, you think I'm like maybe you're not assuming a positive intent of like me just kind of being obtuse to like what we had agreed upon or how we're going to be doing things. And so, and I am not taking enough like ownership over the fact like, but also like I need to step up and like be a grown up and recognize like the processes that we put in place. And so one of the things that was really, I know you had mentioned was frustrating for you, was that we weren't, like, you felt you want to abandon this because you're like, we're not, like, going back every week and looking at our progress, and we're not measuring things. And I jokingly, not jokingly said, like we talked about, right, this was an experiment about how we do this at work. And even at work, I'm resistant of, like, we just put together, like, our operating plan for the year ahead, and there's, like, a gigantic Excel, like, document where we're tracking like how everything is going and what we're doing. And I just get really like, I'm like, let's just do the doing. I don't want to like spend all this time tracking things. And I understand the value of it, but it is not in my, like, it's not my nature. Like it's like I have to force myself to follow these procedures that like require me to assess things in a way that is like how someone else wants to assess them versus like me tracking and doing what I need to do on my own. And so that has been a challenge, the result of which is we have not gone back and looked at our stuff. That to you is a failure, and to me, I am recognizing that it is like holding us back from, I guess, like getting where we want to go.
If we weren't doing the like sitting down and talking about it, if we weren't sticking to like a routine or a system or a process, but we were achieving all of our goals, I don't think it would bother me. I think it would make me unsure, like kind of like I feel unsure if I prop my phone up on the dash so I can use the GPS, but like I can't see my speedometer. I'm like a little bit like, well, I'm going the speed of traffic, but I'm a little uneasy that I can't get the positive confirmation of my speed.
Right.
But I still do it. Similarly, I don't think, I mean, it might make me a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm not objecting or saying like we fundamentally need to rethink the way we approached it last play or last game or last season, whatever, because we're not having the meeting. It's because I don't think we're achieving the goals. Now, again, you're going to say, but we're making progress. Now, progress is a non-zero number. I agree we're making progress. And sometimes our progress is even not just a trivial non-zero number, but like a valid, noteworthy number.
Right.
Whatever that number would be, however we would quantify that. But it isn't, we hit all of our goals. We did it. And I'm just like over here pouting because like, yeah, I know we did it, but we didn't do it the way I wanted to. Like that's how I feel like you're like creating this like caricature of me of like, Markus wants to have a meeting every day. Nerd. Like, I just want to get stuff done. Like, yeah, but we're not getting any stuff done.
But I disagree with you.
Yeah, we're getting a non-zero amount of stuff done. Yeah. But we're not getting all the things done. So if we're not getting all the things done, there's room for improvement.
Yeah.
Now, I attribute at least some of our deficiency to the fact that we're not holding ourselves accountable. It's easier. People are more effective at reading every night with their kid when the teacher makes you color a little calendar. Did you read with your daughter today? Suddenly, you read a lot more because you have to tell her teacher. You have to turn in the homework sheet. But you would say to that teacher, I just want to read to my kid. I don't want to have to like track it. But I know, and the teacher knows, and everyone knows that when you're forced to keep track, you do more. And I'm saying we could be doing more if we could execute on the thing we said we would execute on, which is here's the system that's going to keep us moving toward our goal. And if we could just agree to do the thing, we would get farther along. And then you say, but I just want to do the thing. I don't want to have to like have the meetings about it. But then we don't do the thing. So like we're having this, we're chasing each other around this bush of you saying, I don't want to do the process. I just want to do the doing, but we're not doing the doing. And I'm saying, I think we'd do more doing if we did the process. And you're saying, I don't want to have to do that stuff. I want you to help me short circuit this vicious cycle we're in.
I mean, well, first of all, get me a coloring chart.
Yeah,
Second of all, but the thing is, like, it can't be 12
if I have my daughter make
charts.
you color in.
Right. But it's like, and maybe this comes back to the issue we had early on, which is like when we're trying to accomplish all of the things at the same time.
That I think is a worthwhile thing to re-examine.
Like if you give me a coloring chart on every day I worked out, I would do that thing.
Yeah.
But then what I can't do is like other things. Like
more than one thing.
I'm not going to, like, the bathrooms are not going to be cleaned
right.
Or whatever it is, right?
Same for me. Yeah. Well, but and this we never got this far in season 1, and if we, this will probably be a season 3 thing, or we'll start doing this in parallel with season 2. But the next iteration on and I've had this conversation. I don't know if you and I had this conversation. I had it with a couple people off air. Is pivoting from the like every day, every week, like keep track on the whiteboard of did you do the things, and then like score yourself and put it on a chart and like try to use that as like a positive or negative reinforcement, right. Like to force you to stay focused on the things. I think there's a reasonable person could say that's too many plates to try to simultaneously get spinning.
Right.
And it is actually more effective over the long term because, again, we were in a compressed, like we're trying to get as much stuff going as fast as we can. Right. And now that we're in a like more open-ended new normal as opposed to a like test period of a very compressed 6 months.
Right.
So Benjamin Franklin had this system that he documents in his autobiography where he had a list of like habits he wanted to build, virtues he wanted to cultivate. And his system was on any given week, I only think about one of them. I just think about one. I just focus all my attention other than the stuff I regularly am doing. I'm just trying to maintain throughout the day. I'm going to be honest. That's my one goal. And then he would keep track of just that one thing for like a whole week. Like at the end of the day, he'd write in his diary, did I, fail to be honest? In what way? And then the next week he would shift. I haven't given up on us achieving our goals.
Thank you.
I am very worried about how we pursue our goals so that we're not just creating a lot of frustration and tension and turbulence in our marriage and family life for nothing. I want to avoid that. So that might be any combination of we need to have less ambitious goals. We have to have fewer goals. We have to change the way we focus on our goals. I don't know. Now, I agree, because I already know what you're going to say. It's like, oh, well, we should just like be happy even when we're like doing 10 things. Even when things are stressful, we shouldn't be stressed. Like, we should just not do that. I agree that I aspire to that as well. I don't think that like that's how you do, like you don't get there. Like there's a cliche that all the entrepreneurs use or whatever, like it takes a long time to become an overnight success. Like it takes a lot of hard work to make it look easy. I feel like you just want to be like, let's get to the part where it's easy. Let's just like be the Tiger Woods of family. Like, well, okay, well then when we were 8, we should have started practicing golf, or 4. So I'm not giving up. I don't want us to like beat our heads against the wall. I don't want us to like get fresh, like go through a cycle of like, we're going to be super optimistic and ambitious, and then we're going to be super frustrated, and then we're going to have tension, and then we're going to give up for a while, and then we're going to be super ambitious again. Like, I don't want to like go through cyclical, unhealthy, whatever. So I want to approach this in a way that is preserving, like going back to when we were talking about our work life and financial trade-offs, right? Like, we can have tranquility, we can have money, we can have time. We can like, we don't have to pick one to not have any of, but like you can't have 100% of all three things. There's trade-offs. And I want tranquility more than I want money or time. And I want time more than I want money. Which is why I'm not making any money right now. Did it.
Success.
Well, and even
color in a smiley face on our chore chart.
Well, and even our like our actual like our courses of action and like the graphic that I had, which people can download at mr-homemaker.com to follow along at home. But we are actually executing one of those courses of action, the one that was, I'm just a full-time Mr. Homemaker, no money, lots of time, lots of tranquility. Now we are also sort of like starting or whatever, like we're trying to figure out if we can transition from Mr. Homemaker to me chasing those dollars as an entrepreneur and freelance consultant.
Right.
But again, in the same way that I don't want to like jump into that until I really feel like, yeah, we're in a good place with our household management,
right,
with our kids, with you and me, like things are good, and it isn't going to like force an unacceptable trade-off for me to be like, I am really going to undertake a project now, like a professional endeavor. I don't want to do that until I'm confident that like things are stable. And we're not there. I guess that's my biggest thing is like, we need to retool the goals and the way you and I are pursuing our goals, and even just the way you and I are communicating and ebbing and flowing, as you like to say, so that I feel confident enough that like it doesn't require full-time attention because I don't have to rebuild the house of cards every day.
Right.
Like we're progressing in a way that like we're getting better and we're not backsliding. And so like, yeah, I know that I will have a certain amount of time. And now that I have certain predictability and certain level of effort, I can give a thing and I can make commitments to people. Then I can pursue other stuff. It is like, I'm saying like, hey man, I don't know if sick kids and not sleepless nights and like we don't have any like flex in the system or like those things that aren't necessarily in our control. We don't have enough resilience in our household dynamics to absorb those things.
Well, I disagree a little bit. So I think, so we're in, like, one thing that we have to, like, extend, right, is, so let's think about my work for a minute. Like, let's think about work life. And, like,
that's where we shine. Yeah.
So part of it is, like, we're in a different phase, and therefore, fairly or unfairly, there are different expectations that I put on myself and that my work puts on me, right? My boss knows that I have a full-time stay-at-home husband. Right. And so it's expected, like, if my kids are sick, I can't be, like, I mean, today, like, our youngest, like, started not feeling well, and I was like, hey, like, I gotta step away for a little bit, and she was totally cool, but in the back of my head, I was like, she's probably like, you have a stay-at-home husband, and I don't, like, what are you, like, you know, and so I think that if and when you are ready to take the step into like entrepreneurial life, we just have to work on, like, there's trade-offs. Like, it's never going to be perfect, and there are going to be trade-offs of, you know what, my husband is now consulting and he has a work meeting or a project today. Like, I feel like I have more flexibility than most in terms of, like, it's more about the self-pressure I put on myself. Like, I've got enough sick leave and annual leave, like, I could take care of our kids for weeks if they got sick. Yeah. And so I think it's more about, like, once you jump into that, that's, like, an understanding that we have to have of, like where that flex comes in. And whereas you are handling more of the day to day, I think I would need to accept, especially in the beginning as you are establishing yourself, more of the like unpredictable, like taking on the unpredictable stuff. So like that's an agreement we would have to come to.
Well, I think this is an important conversation then, because I think we're identifying we just need to align on it. So rather than frame it as a conflict,
right,
or an incompatibility,
right,
very
right,
onerously, like, yeah, I think we need to think through and discuss how we see that playing out, because what you're describing is a high risk approach, and I am more risk averse than you are.
Yeah.
Because it is more dangerous to me to make a commitment that I can't follow through on than to just not make a commitment.
Well,
or to wait until I'm certain I can follow through on a commitment.
But you'll never be like, so unless you are going to accept my offer that your stuff would have to take the front burner, and we'd have to put parameters on that, right? Like, part of you staying at home is that like our son is home 2 days a week, and so short of like, oh, I'm really in a bind and this contract I'm working on, I need to be in on Tuesday and we don't send our kid to school on Tuesday, like short of that, that's part of the parameters you're putting in place, which is like, I can be in in-person meetings this day, this day, this day, and that's my availability. And then...
Oh, no. So that's not the kind of thing I had in mind. I hear you, and that is valid. I mean more like, if I say, this is going to take me 10 hours to do, in theory, our child being at daycare gives me 20 hours a week.
Right.
But if one of those days is blown because he's sick, now I don't have 10 hours.
Well, but what I'm saying is in that priority circumstance, you do. Because I have the ability to step back from work.
Yeah.
Especially in...
But see, I don't know that you do until you do it. Well, I guess what I'm saying, like, 'cause you see what I'm saying? Like, I won't know this week that next week he's going to be sick and that you'll be able to take off work. You see what I'm saying?
I mean, there's a couple things that, like, one, I would have to. If I were... short of me traveling, like I was in the middle of traveling and he got sick, in which case, like, we have family fairly close by most of the time that could help. Or, like, I think there are options. And then there's, like, just like in any other job, like, it's not like you're like, I have 10 hours to do this and it's this 10 hours this week, right? Like, there's a little bit of, like, flex on it that we would have to figure out, like, how to make it work. Like, if you have a deadline, like, then that becomes the priority.
Yeah.
There's also a point where you're like, people get that kids are sick, and we, like, if I was like somewhere, I was like across the country, like, then that's just, but like the likelihood of those things all, like, that confluence of events happening like more than once, I think is smaller than you think. So I do think we have to accept that, like, I don't think the risk is as high as I think you think it is, but I think that we cannot have certainty. And I feel like sometimes you want certainty in a system where, like, there just can't be, because you're not one person living in a house by yourself with no other people or children. Like, that's the only way to have certainty. And so, but I think we could talk about, like, how we, like, what the priority would be and how we would try to adjust to that. And, like, I think that's doable. I think I'm in a job now where I do have that flexibility.
Well, but as you say, like, there's nothing keeping you from exercising that flexibility, but you don't. And so you're suggesting that we would have to, like, figure out what criteria you would exercise that flexibility. That's what I'm saying, like,
I don't exercise that flexibility now because you're a full-time stay-at-home dad.
No, I'm an entrepreneur and a freelance consultant.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're not like doing any projects right now.
Hey, why?
Right. But so if we're having this frank conversation, right? Like we're not at that point. Like, and when we were at that point and you were at work, we were trading off and figuring it out.
But we also aren't achieving our family goals, right? Like, so in theory, that would also be a catalyst for you to be like, I could take a couple days off and take a 4-day weekend so that we could tackle a project, or we could move the ball forward on one of our goals that you're saying we've made a non-zero progress, but you're also not combating me that like, well, we also haven't achieved the goals like the way we thought we would.
Right.
Well, we could be further along even if you weren't like having a meeting with me once a week, you'd be further along if you were taking more leave.
Yeah.
To work on family stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not. So what I'm saying is it's like, I kind of feel like this is like a carrot on the end of a stick, or like a mirage. You're like, well, under certain conditions, I would. It's like, well, why aren't those conditions being met now? And if they're not being met now, why would that change? Like, I don't want to like go walk toward the water in the desert and then be like, oh, that was just in my mind. That wasn't real water.
Yeah. Well, because I think like one, we haven't like put markers on the wall of like, this is the day we're gonna do this thing.
Well,
and like
we did. That was the whole point of all the goal setting, is we set goals and we set numbers and
but
days.
We didn't like pick, like we didn't say like, hey, let's look 3 weeks out and pick a day.
No, because you wouldn't meet with me.
And so I think like that needs to be part of this, is like, hey, we want to achieve this thing, but then like the day comes and it's like there's 100 other things that we like do and we're not ready and we don't want to do like.
Yeah.
So like, let's pick days and do it. The reality is like,
but I can't pick the days for you. I mean, so like I don't want to assume negative intent, but I don't think you're deliberately doing anything. I just think that what you're saying, it doesn't match our experience. I can't tell you when you can take days off. I can't tell you when you'll feel comfortable being away from work. I can't tell you which things will motivate you to do that. And so like you're like being like, well, Marcus, when you Marcus determine this thing, then I'll happily get on board. It's like, it is impossible for me to determine this thing. And the things that I would need you to do so I could determine it, there's other things we don't do. So I mean, I'm open to you being like, well, yeah, because we were doing it this way, but if we did it that way, it would work better, or whatever. I'm just saying, like, from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're setting the bar in a place I can't get to.
Well, I think the difference is like, I've said, hey, like, what about if we tackle this thing? And you're like, I don't want to do that thing, and then we just like never move past it, right? Like, I'm like, I'll take a day off. Like, let's like focus on like getting the basement organized so that we can do this thing, and it's like there's resistance. So if you want to tell me the things you want to do and when you need me to take off, like, hey, in the next, like, if we can do it 2 weeks out. Yeah,
I think the Benjamin Franklin thing will help a lot in this as well. I think when we in a sense are getting paralyzed by, there are 6 things that we're trying to do. It's only possible to do 2 or 3 of these things, and then we get paralyzed by like, well, how are we going to try to spread the peanut butter thin enough that we can get to these? And it's like, well, we can't do any of them enough to move the needle. So maybe this all just comes back to, everything gets better when we narrow our focus. Okay. I'm willing to entertain that possibility. So yeah, I mean, so season 2 isn't season 1. I think there are 2 reasons it has value. One thing is, the season 1 type content does not do anything for somebody who isn't already married. It doesn't do nothing for them. But I feel like putting on the hat of, how would you think, how could you better think about and prepare for, like, get your head in the right space to talk about marriage with your significant other, for example. I think it is good to help people in that boat. And as I said, when we kicked off season 2, I think that unlike 100 years ago, every couple basically could take for granted that we're on the same page, and basically we're going to run the same play our parents ran.
Right.
Because your parents and my parents ran the same play, and now we're going to run that play. We're just going to keep doing that. But now, with every generation, every decade, or every 5 years, or every 6 months, they change the play. And so somebody who's 20 years old today, let's say 22, so they're still a millennial technically, that millennial, their marriage landscape looks totally different than ours did as millennials, which looks totally different than our parents' did as boomers. And in the middle of it, there was some Gen Xing that was also different than the millennials and also different than the boomers. So I think that's a real risk factor, is that basically, like, insofar as the primary place people are trained in marriage and family life is in their own childhood, then when in the intervening years between you're 18, you leave the house, and then 10 years later you get married, marriage changed a lot in 10 years. And you now have no context. I think that's a huge risk factor. No matter what you think the play should look like, I think it's incumbent not only on us. Excuse me, you're making me sick. I really think, like, it's particularly in an internet-enabled age, and to counterbalance, like, on the one hand, there's all the, like, Instagramming, like, perfect lifeness, and there's all the, like, woe is me-ish, like, marriage bashing and whatever. Like, there's just a lot of weird messages out there.
Yeah.
And I think there's a desperate need for reasonably well-functioning adults to provide information to other reasonably well-functioning adults who are a few years behind them, because those people need information in a way that they wouldn't have needed information 5 or 10 generations ago.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any validity to that?
Yes.
Say more about how you agree with me.
No. And we talked about this. Oh, I've got a tip for someone who wants to be a dad.
Okay, what's your break?
Are you an aspiring dad? Do you own a phone that you do not have backed up to the cloud? Fix it today.
I will say I've told many people on Reddit, like, people will be like, what's your number one? So I'll be like,
back up your pictures to the cloud. Markus has now 3 phones worth of...
3?
Yes, because it was a work phone, and then it was 2 non-work phones, including pictures of the birth of 2 of our children that are now gone. I'm glad you have memories, but they won't. And they're literally, like, so 2 pieces of advice. 1, are you a dad? Take pictures of your wife doing things with their kids, because your wife is taking 1,000 pictures of you doing things with your kids, and there are very few pictures of her doing things because she's the one taking the pictures. Then the pictures you do take, please back them up, because your kid's gonna get a hold of your camera and your phone and throw it on the ground, and those pictures will be gone forever. This has been a public service announcement.
I would like to endorse this message. Yes, I think that is a valid, sound piece of advice. And I would also like to observe how that's a great example of how quickly things change. Because somewhere in a box in the basement are the 10 pictures of me from the time I was born to the time you and I met.
I understand that that's your justification right now.
But I have no frame of reference.
You don't have more pictures?
No, I don't. I genuinely feel bad that you feel sad. I do feel badly.
But you don't.
I have no emotional attachment to the photographs in our life. I'm not. You don't need to convince me.
Well, you told me you're like, I have 10 pictures and I'm fine.
No, what I'm saying is, I was not conditioned as a child.
Yeah.
Nor did I have a role model to observe, like, dads should be recording and taking photos. Like, we didn't do that.
Right.
Do you still want to be married to me? You can take your time. Think about it.
Yes, I suppose I do.
Okay. Do you want to stay living in the same house?
Yes. Well, like, no.
No, I mean, like,
Like, as
together.
you or
as me.
I mean, I love this house.
Yeah.
But I want a bigger house so that we can have lots of people over all the time.
I thought we already agreed last season that we were just going to add on.
I don't think there's enough space to add on, but we can see. If by add on you mean build a short walkway to the house behind us and also own that house, I'm in.
Okay, so we're going to stay married. We're going to live together. Should we keep all the kids or put some of them up for adoption?
No, I love all of them.
Okay, we're going to keep all the kids.
Do you want to get rid of some of them?
No, I'm just trying to like eliminate variables. I'm just trying to work my way through the system. Okay.
So I do want to stay with you. I love our children. I will live in this house, which is lovely, but also
what is realistic for when and how? Okay, first of all, what's realistic, and two, what will motivate and inspire you to take the time and sit down with me to update, revise, recommit to our goals, and fashion a version 2.0 of like how we're going to, in a less overwhelming kind of way, try to like steadily get better.
Right. Can, as I would in the workplace, may I take the draft that we currently have and propose revisions in written form?
Like track changes in a shared Google Doc?
Like, I'm going to actually
Or
handwrite on
handwrite it?
this and hand it back to you because I prefer that as a speechwriter.
That's fine.
And then hand it back to you, and then we can have a conversation based on what I've shared with you.
That sounds lovely.
I don't like to share the creative process. Like, when people are like, let's live edit this, I'm like, no.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with
Like,
that.
I used to have a boss who would, like, sit over, like, there was, like, there was 3 of us.
Yeah.
Speechwriting. 2 of them were really good back and forth, and I was like,
Yeah.
I need to, like, step away
Yeah.
and write this, and then I'll give you what I think we should do.
Yeah.
I would like to do that.
I like it. By when would you... honestly, I'm not trying to pressure you, because...
I've already done half of it, so I can do tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah.
But I'm only editing mine. Like, I'm not editing yours unless you want me to.
I want you to. Well, if nothing else, because... No, I think it'd be good if you did. Yeah. Because you can look at the whole thing as a whole picture.
Yeah.
And we can have a starting point where you've already, like, level set across everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to do a round of edits on our season 1 vision and mission and goals.
Yes.
And you and I will reconvene to review those edits.
Will you be mad if I write on the papers you gave me?
I will not. I will not be mad. And for bonus points, if we're really feeling a spring in our step, and honestly, we could do it now, or we could wait till the new year. But if not sooner than the new year, I think I already have it on my list. Is that we should do because people do like resolutions and stuff.
Yeah.
So like after we get back from Thanksgiving, I think we should like pick somewhere in the first 2 weeks of December.
Okay.
To record us like putting on our managerial hats and going to our outline and like, okay, like you would for like a audiobook.
Yeah.
All right, this is step 1 where you and your husband should sit down and talk about your vision for your family, and then like you share a reflection about what that means to you, and I share a reflection about what that means to me. Maybe we feel like here's a few positive things to try. Here's a few pit stops to avoid. Now pause the thing while you do that exercise.
I love that.
That's what we should do in December.
I love it. To help people in January.
Yeah, I think that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. That becomes the second Wednesday of December. We will publish that, and it will be our prepare for the new year episode.
Love
and
it.
We'll do your best year ever, and we'll do the 7 habits, and we'll do...
Get your cocktails, do your stuff.
Yeah, so we're going to...
Here's some recommended drinks, because we're going to drink them right now.
All of that.
I love it.
Are you in protest and defiance of the content I've chosen for season 2, refusing to be part of those discussions? Is that your position that like you don't have anything to do with it until we go back to season 3 and we're
You mean
focusing?
like the philosophical underpinnings? Yeah, I don't.
You don't have anything to do with it.
I mean, I'm happy to be on a summary episode and be like, oh, or like, hey, I listened to all your podcasts and here's my thoughts. But like, I don't want to be put on the spot.
You'd have to start listening to them though, right?
Like, I'm like,
you don't want to be put on the spot. What?
to like discuss philosophical views that I don't have a solid footing on, nor do I honestly really care about. Like, I don't have a solid footing, and I have no desire to like explore them. I'll listen to what you have to say and like be interested, but like I don't. You have other people that can have those conversations with you. I'll listen. I'll provide like 10 minutes of feedback. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll listen. I'll feel like psyched about it, but I just like that's not my wheelhouse.
How do you think an 18-year-old woman should think about setting her priorities among her self, individual development, her self-help kind of stuff, her formal education, making money, finding a spouse, being a good mom? Do you have thoughts about how a young woman should think about those things?
Yes. Clearly, I'm a mom with girls. I do.
Have you learned anything in your years? Do you have any wisdom that you think others would benefit from hearing in those areas?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm missing. So it's not, if you're answering yes, but you're saying you don't want to have discussions about like philosophical topics.
Yeah, like I don't want to
that's a philosophical topic.
No, I don't want to have conversations about like what is your like approach to human life, and what do you think, like, are you a humanist or a realist, or like, I don't you can categorize me based on the things that I share with you, but I am more even in this conversation I am more focused on like the practical pieces and not the like what is the title that I'm gonna put on it. If you want to put a title on what I tell you, that's fine, but I don't need to explore the 27 different frameworks that a person could use to approach their worldview. Like I don't need to. This is not. I'm not interested.
Okay.
I'm sure that I fall into a bucket.
Do you feel that way about like political philosophy, or like political parties? Like you're like libertarian, progressive, conservative. I don't really care. I just think what I think.
I mean, I feel like it is more because there are fewer of those buckets, and they are more clear in like mainstream life. Like I think I can bucket myself, but I don't think that I live by that. I think I'm like, I take each situation and determine kind of where, based on my background and my education and my thoughts, like where I think I go, and those things change. Like I have changed a lot of things in marrying you and like looking at things through a different lens.
For the better, right?
I have no comment. but I do, like, there are things I never would have like thought about had I married someone else. Like I would have been like, I'm just like living my life and I feel this way because that's the way I feel, and I probably would be less introspective.
So let me say this though, I like what you're saying, and actually someone who I hope will be a future guest.
Is it me?
I do hope you'll be a future guest.
Yeah.
But I meant somebody else. So that person and I already had an exchange about there is a hazard associated with picking teams. And that actually goes back all the way to episode 0, when you accused me very judgmentally of being a conservative. I was like, I don't identify as a conservative. And then you were like, oh, okay, I'll call you a progressive. I was like, I don't want you to call me a progressive either. But you're saying the same thing, even though you're rolling your eyes at me, because
Well, but because you are, is what I'm saying.
Well,
What I'm telling you is, if you tell me,
Yeah.
based on the things you've said, you fall in this bucket, I'll be like, okay. But I'm not not gonna like self-identify that way, nor am I going to take the time to survey the different approaches, because it doesn't matter to me in the way I approach things. Like, because I almost like feel like if you tell me like you're a humanist, I'm gonna be like, well, either I'm gonna feel pressured to like, it's like when you're like, you're a Republican.
Yeah.
Well, now you're pressured to like hold that line.
Exactly. No, and that's the point. Is actually, I think there's a lot of merit to, or a significant benefit to the attitude you're taking, which is, I'm not going to pigeonhole myself. I want to maintain intellectual latitude to
And
adapt.
curiosity to be able to,
I think there's a lot of merit to that.
talk to me when I'm 80. Maybe I'll feel differently. I'll be like, no, I've found my way, and this is right, and this is wrong, and we are done. But
here's I think there's a potential downside. So there's an upside. I'm acknowledging there's an upside, but I think there's a potential downside, which is, and maybe this I suspect this just doesn't matter to you as much as it might matter to other people who might be sitting here. But the potential downside is that if you're not having the meta conversation and doing the meta analysis of like, well, what do I think and why do I think that, and what are the second and third order effects of me holding this view?
right.
And is this view consistent with my other view on this related topic? Like, you could theoretically say, I think the minimum wage should be $15 an hour. I also think that people should be able to work any job they want for any wage that they think is fair. If those two things are mutually exclusive.
Right.
But if you aren't thinking through like, oh, wait, I see how these two things I just said are connected.
Right.
And now I have to reconcile this apparent contradiction. And maybe there is a way to reconcile it. But now that requires you to dive deeper.
Yeah.
And do like more nuanced. Well, what I mean is,
Right.
under certain circumstances, X is true, but only under those circumstances.
Well,
and under other circumstances, Y is true.
Right.
And that's not a contradiction. I have a nuanced view.
Right. And the difference is most people don't dive deeper. A majority of people will say, I have categorized myself in this way, and I'm gonna stand with that.
I think that's right.
Till the end of time.
I agree that is a big hazard.
Right.
Yeah,
and so that's where I get worried. Is like I don't care enough about the like label of what it is. Like, there are times when I'll recognize, oh, those things don't make sense together, and I should probably reconcile that. But what I don't want to do is be like, well, the X view is this, and so I'm gonna go with that view because because I think I'm Republican, Democrat, whatever, like humanist, independent, whatever that is, right? Like, I don't want.
You don't want to sign on to more than.
Well, I don't want to be lazy in my intellect and be like, you know what, like, because I think people can do that and be like, well, I have to double down on this, or I've got to take a heck of a lot of time to figure out and like reconcile why I believe this but not this.
You know what's so ironic about this whole conversation?
What? You're gonna whammy me.
No, it's not a whammy, but what's ironic about it is you're saying you're not interested in having the philosophical conversation when, as it happens, the exact philosophical conversation that I'm having is with somebody who formally holds the position you just articulated.
Well, great.
And would argue the thing you just argued, like that's like their thing is.
That's a philosophy.
That's their philosophy. Their philosophy is you need to critically examine these things and not be lazy and just take for granted that like, oh, well, I am on team X and I'm just going to do whatever team X. You need to exercise your critical judgment to ensure that you're properly evaluating claims and not giving them more weight than they deserve.
Right. But then when do you cross the line of just being like subjective with everything? Like, well, I feel this way.
Which is why this is. I was saying I think about it a certain way.
Yeah.
And I want to really step back and take the time to validate the way I'm thinking about it and understand how other people are thinking about it. I'm not trying to argue with anybody or debate anybody or persuade anybody. I'm just like, I'm acknowledging I see it this way. I want to find somebody who really has thoughtfully staked out a position that is very distinct from my own.
Right.
Right. Like, explain to me how you got there.
Yeah.
Well, because I question whether or not you even have enough information to judge whether or not you need more information. It's almost like, it's like me saying, I don't need a checkup. I don't need to go to the doctor and have him look at me. There's nothing wrong. Why would I go and have him tell me if there's something wrong? I already know there's nothing wrong. Yeah. Like, I don't think you've even taken like the initial responsible steps to know if there's something wrong.
Well, so I think there's a couple things. Like, what do you think the end of life is, right? Like,
are we talking philosophical or medical?
Like, no. Philosophical. Like, what I'm saying to you is, had I not married you, I could have gone my whole life without ever pondering the, like, philosophical underpinnings of my beliefs. I would have just lived my life.
It's not even clear to me that you would have had any beliefs. You would have just, like you're just been acting without belief.
Like, but yeah. I could, like, move through my life and, like, do what I thought was right and made a difference in the world, was important, and, like, helped humanity. Like, that would be, like, if I could describe like, the life I aspire to live, right? Like, I want, like, I want to do something that matters, to leave an impact, to, like, and then to have, like, personal satisfaction in my life, which to me was, like, having a family and, like, all of that. And that's how I drive, like, meaning for my life.
Ruggedly handsome husband.
And a ruggedly handsome husband. But, like, had I not met you, like, I would just be, like, living my life, doing my thing, not having these conversations, and I would live a perfectly full life, not without you, but without, like, I would never have considered listening to a guy on a podcast talk about, like, how he feels about truth. And, like, millions of Americans millions of people around the world live their life, and, like, and I don't want to debate the merits of, like, that life, right? Like, are you just, like, abiding by this, like, your political view, your religious view, your whatever view without questioning? Like that's what I'm trying to say is, like...
So millions of people do it. I don't think anybody disputes that. The question is whether or not those people are living fulfilling lives, or whether or not they are living life well. And I don't think that you can even, again, like, going back to, like, getting the annual checkup so you can decide whether or not you need to, like, change your diet or see a specialist. You don't even know if you're like, I know I don't need to change my diet or see a specialist. You know how I know that? It's because I haven't asked my primary care physician to tell me that. Like, similarly, there's millions of people who don't feel like they need to change the way they live or change the way they think about their life.
Right.
Because millions of people haven't taken the time to be like, is there anything potentially wrong with how I'm living my life? Like, everybody's just like, I'm just going to live my life.
Yeah.
And whatever I do is fine.
Right.
So, like, in a sense, like, yeah, you could have chosen a life of ignorance, like self-delusion, but that doesn't mean, like, you would have been fine. It just means, like, well, you could have chosen to, like, live in the cave.
I mean, I think that...
like,
we all choose to live life in ignorance in different areas of our life, right? Like, none of us are all knowing of all things.
But so, you don't... I would think truth would be, like, one of the primary things you start to figure out. Like, okay, I need to figure out how to, like, meet my Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I need to, like, feed myself and have a house and not get murdered. But pretty quickly it'd be like, well, how should I be, like, conducting myself in the world in order to, like, do good for humanity, as you say? Well, that demands answers to a couple subsidiary questions about, like, good.
You rely on the construct of truth that is provided to you in your upbringing, right? Like, not everybody is or needs to question that.
Yeah.
Like, what my approach is. Like,
I actually agree with that, and that's one thing that my soon-to-be interlocutor, I think, takes significant issue with. Umbrage.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Is he would say, no, that is irresponsible, is to just accept received wisdom. And honestly, Jared pushed back on that too last episode, saying, like, he and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but, like, he sort of took exception with my suggestion that, like, well, you can just, like, receive wisdom from your parents and, like, just take their word for it. He was like, well, you should probably challenge that, and if it's good, valid, then you'll keep it. But you shouldn't just take it for granted. And I think I disagree with him on that. And I think I disagree with a potential future guest who has a more like sort of formalized position on that topic. I think you and I are in agreement about this.
Well, but I think that you would challenge that wisdom that you received by like looking at other perspectives and viewpoints. But I don't think it is often from the philosophical lens of like, well, do I believe it because of this philosophy? You're just like, let me read the different information that's out there. And
what do you mean read the different information? What does that mean?
So like if your parents tell you that
you should have a low-fat diet.
Right. There's not a philosophical approach to whether or not you should have a low-fat diet.
Yeah.
You like read the medical studies, maybe talk to your doctor, maybe like whatever your sources of information are to come to a conclusion on like, yes, I want to follow this, you know.
But you're saying it's really, in that scenario for you, it's really a matter of evaluating which experts to rely upon.
Right.
But you don't need to you're not going to take it upon yourself to like read the studies. You're like, well, this guy seems like he knows what he's talking about. This guy seems like he's making it up.
I mean, it depends on like how serious the thing is and how much I want to know about it, right?
Yeah,
like, there's some things where I dive into the studies, there's other things where I'm like, I gotta like take someone else's
word
guidance
for it.
and I trust Oprah and she's gonna tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like.
No, but I think that's right. I think you and I are
being silly, but.
Yeah. No, I think that somehow I'm agreeing with you.
It's weird, because I feel like.
Well, because I guess what I'm saying is, this, you and I are agreeing on the value of a heuristic, which is I can't solve every problem myself. I need to be comfortable taking it
right.
on faith that this other person who I regard as a qualified expert, that's my best shot is to go with them.
Right.
So we're agreeing that is valuable to do that. But we're arriving at different conclusions because I guess my next thing is, well, in order to evaluate the credibility of a potential expert, I at least need to know enough to evaluate their credibility. Mm-hmm. It can't be that like I just choose which cable news channel to watch by like, well, whichever one comes up first, like whichever one has a lower number in the channel sequence, that's the one I watch. But there's got to be some additional layer of like, well, let me survey the landscape of like, well, what are all the news channels saying? And what can I learn about these different networks so that I can be like, oh, they're saying very different things, and I can see why I weigh the credibility of this one greater than the credibility of that one.
Right.
But I feel like you're stopping short of that one step deeper of like, well, I have to learn enough to evaluate. You're like, no, I don't need to. I've already got my thing. I'm sticking with my thing. I don't need to like question my thing. I'm already sticking to it. Yeah, we need more like example. We need like run an example through. Yeah. Because otherwise, I fear we're just like doing it's a non-zero number, but it's not 100. Right. So we have a non-zero, non-100 number. We don't know what that number is in between. This is a really good philosophical discussion that you and I just had about having philosophical discussions.
I both support your endeavor and this conversation.
Okay.
I love you.
Well, I really appreciate having you on today. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to your next visit to the studio here.
I feel like you're not acknowledging the fact that it's almost midnight. You're welcome. You're like, well, thanks for showing up.
What do you mean you're welcome? This was your idea. You're like, we should record. We should do this tonight. And you're like, you're welcome.
Thanks for showing up to my podcast.
Thank you so much for attending today's discussion with Mr. Homemaker. Please take this opportunity to subscribe, like, and share this episode with your spouse, relatives, and friends. We further invite you to access complimentary information and resources at our website, mr-homemaker.com. There you will also find links to join the discussion via email or social media. And please, support the Mr. Homemaker podcast, and receive merchandise and membership benefits on patreon.com. Until next time, farewell.